Central Radio Network. I'm one of your hosts, Aaron Freeman, joined with my co-host, Scott Karasik. Today we are talking quite a bit. We're doing our final podcast before the draft. We're going to be talking about some of the recent rumors with the Falcons possibly training up, answering all you guys' mailbag questions. We'll also be talking about the team's schedule that dropped this past Thursday. Give you an overview on our thoughts on that, our first impressions on that. And we'll talk a little bit about some of the roster moves that have taken place over the last couple of days, starting with Taylor Gabriel signing his RFA tenor and Jake Matthews getting the fifth-year option picked up. Neither of these are big moves, grand moves. They were sort of expected. But, we got two questions from Evan Birchfield on these two moves in particular. That's why we're talking about them. We got to give love for our friend Evan. But the first one is on the Gabriel signing. It is, can you explain the whole Taylor Gabriel tender signing? What would have happened if he didn't sign since it was near the deadline?
So Taylor Gabriel didn't sign by, I want to say it's like May 8th or something like that, May 9th, something along that line. He would have been able to have the offer rescinded, and then he would have turned into an exclusive rights free agent. And Atlanta could have signed him for super cheap. So, of course, he was going to sit there and sign it. And then he, Brian, we're echoing. But yeah, so basically the Taylor Gabriel tender signing, he signs it because the Thursday, this past Thursday was the deadline for him to get an offer from another team. Had another team given him an offer, he would have signed, and Atlanta would have gotten their second round pick. Had he gotten, had he decided to not sign it, he would have been given the $615K tender or $660K tender. But because he decided to sign it, Atlanta's got him for $2.75 million for a year, and they've got until next March to re-sign him long term.
Yeah, I mean, basically there was really nothing that really could have happened if he didn't sign his tender, because essentially, like, yeah, I mean, like the way the league works is RFAs really can't do nothing. Like, they don't have it. Imagine a scenario where he refused to sign his tender because he wants the Falcons to pay him a long-term deal. Well, he can't really do that because he would lose a season of to qualify for free agency, and he wouldn't be able to become an unrestricted free agent next year. So there really was nothing to that whole thing. Whether he signed it last Thursday or whether he signed it next week, it wouldn't have made a difference. It was just something that basically he had to wait around to a long enough period of time to see if somebody else was going to offer him an offer sheet, which that deadline expired at whenever that was last week. And when a team didn't, then he was going to be a Falcon this year. Okay, let's talk about Jake Matthews. Again, another question from Evan. He asked, we picked up Jake Matthews' 50-year option, but some fans were complaining / wanting position change. Can you tell them why they're dumb?
Jake Matthews is a top 10 to 14 range. Aaron and I could quibble on that all day, like exactly where he lines up. I think we'll both agree that he's in that range at least. At left tackle, I mean, the dude is let's look at it this way. There's 14 guys at left tackle at most that are as good or better than Jake Matthews. And you guys want to move him to guard because you want to right guard. Who are you going to put in at left tackle from one of the weakest left tackle classes in history? I'd love to know.
Yeah. I'm trying to say this kindly. Like, I get why people criticize Jake Matthews. I think he's far from a perfect left tackle, but I think sort of it's the same. I would explain it the same way I would explain like paying quarterbacks a bunch of money. It's one of those things where if you want a good quarterback, you're gonna have to pay him, $18 to $25 million a year. Whether you think that guy is technically worth it, really doesn't matter. the other option, the alternative is to basically be in the situation that so many other teams that are in sort of this quarterback hungry situation are in right now, and you don't want to be in that situation. So if you have to overpay a quarterback in order to make sure you have stability at that position for, and certainly in the Falcons case, another 6 or 7 years, if not more, then it makes sense. And I think it's the same way with Jake Matthews, who's what, 24, 25. Now I know he's had some durability issues, but there's no reason to think that even if those issues continue, that he won't still give this team 5 to 7 more solid years, if not more. And it's one of those things where, like, yeah, you have to pay a premium for that, but the alternative is, do you want to be a team like the Giants, where you're relying on Eric Flowers, or I just don't think it's worthwhile. I think Jake Matthews is may not be the elite left tackle, but I think he's more than capable. And when he plays his best football, he's on the same level as some of those first or second tier left tackles. So, yeah, I guess I hope that answers your question, Evan, and why people are dumb not wanting him to get that 5th-year option. But I think it's more than worth it. All right, let's move on and talk about the schedule. I don't know. There's a whole lot to say. I don't think it needs to require a week by week breakdown. But I thought, some of the interesting things that the Falcons had on their schedule was they got 5 primetime games, 2 Sunday night games in the first half of the season, 2 Monday night games in the second half of the season. They got the Thursday night game. They also got a 4:00 game against the Cowboys, which will probably be the game of the week on Fox that week. So that would be basically a primetime game in the afternoon. So a couple of high-profile games for the Falcons, that's pretty new to have that number. I think 5 is the most in franchise history, and I think we've only had maybe 4, coming off of the previous Super Bowl and the 2012 season in some of those years. So I think we're on the come up. So it's nice to see the Falcons get some national recognition. Okay. We got a mailbag question about the schedule. ATL Sports 404 asks, the NFL schedule was recently released. Will Aaron or Scott be attending any Falcon games this year?
Yes. I don't know which one. Probably going to eye the Cowboys game. Just because I got a bunch of friends from Charleston that want to come in and hang out for it. So I'll probably go to that one. Ideally, I'll go to the Packers opener. Ideally. And then maybe even the Panthers game to close the season out. I try to go to 2 to 3 games a year when I can. I didn't have the time last year, but I should definitely be able to this year.
Yeah, I don't know, guys. Like every year I say I'll try to make it, because I live in North Carolina. Every year I say I'll try to make it to the Panthers game here in North Carolina. I never do, so I won't make that mistake anymore to say that I will and not. But I would like to get down to the stadium this year and check it out. Before it gets old and busted. But we'll see. It just really sort of depends on sort of whether I can put it in my budget when we get to the fall. Same guy, ATL Sports 404 asks, over or under 10 wins for the Atlanta Falcons this season?
I think they'll probably end up winning 10 games. You look at it, 4-2 in the division. I'll say over. I think they could go 12-4 against the schedule. 4-2 against the division will just be right there. Then you add the Jets. Then you add the Dolphins. Sorry to our producer, Brian. Then you add the Bills. I don't think any of those 3 teams are any good. They get the Vikings, who aren't really that good. They get the Bears. I mean, right there, that's 9 wins. Probably going to beat the Lions. They can beat the Packers. They can beat the Cowboys. They can beat the Seahawks. Like, they can beat literally every team on their schedule. They can. I don't think that they will, but I said this in 2012. They can beat every team on their schedule, but they're going to lose anywhere between 2 and 5 games, just depending on luck, just depending on everything else. So as long as there's no major injury, I don't see any reason why this team can't win a minimum of 11 games, especially if they have a good draft class, which, as we've seen under Dan Quinn, is a lot more likely than we're willing to admit.
Yeah, I think that's a fair statement. You know, if I was, I would probably say push because I feel like 10-6 is about what I feel like this team is going to do this year. But I certainly think they're more than capable of going over that. You know, outside the division, I think the 6 toughest games are Packers, Lions, Patriots, Cowboys, Seahawks, and Vikings. My general philosophy is you generally take those toughest games and you split the difference and say the team's going to win 3 of them and they'll lose 3 of them. And then if you assume that they'll go 4-2 in the division, then that's 5 losses right there. So that's 11-5, I think. And yeah, so I certainly think it's, you know, if you were forced me to bet over or under, I'd probably take the over. But yeah, we'll see what happens.
So Aaron's saying 11-5. I'm saying 12-4. You know, we're both confident in this team.
Yeah. Okay. You got any other thoughts on the schedule, Scott, before we move on and start talking about some of this draft stuff?
Let's go into the draft.
Okay. Well, I was going to talk a little bit about some of these reports of people like Reuben Foster and Garyon Conley and whatnot, but I think we can sort of skip that because there's Falcons stuff to talk about. So,
yeah,
particularly with the trade-up rumors, we got a report from Von McClure. He wrote an article, I should say, not necessarily a report, that the Falcons might be interested in trading up for Temple linebacker / edge rusher Hassan Riddick. And we also got a report from Tony Pauline, who said that the Falcons and the Seahawks are talking to one another in terms of swapping picks. Seahawks pick 26, and that the Falcons would try to leapfrog some of the teams like the Steelers and Cowboys picking ahead of them for an edge rusher like Charles Harris. So, you know, I guess the first question I'd ask you, Scott, is how much are you buying these rumors or reports?
Remember when I said a couple weeks ago that I think the Falcons are going to trade up for a defensive end? They'll probably do a trade up to that 20 to like 24 range. If it ends up being number 26, that still works for me. And it's probably going to be for Jordan Willis. I still believe it. I still believe it's going to be Jordan Willis. I still believe they're going to trade up, give up a 4th, and that'll be the guy. I believe this is probably going to happen. Now, who it is, I don't know. I don't think they're going to trade up far enough for Hassan Reddick, but I think that's because Hassan Reddick's going to go in the top half of the draft. Like top half of the first round.
Yeah, I got Hassan Reddick going either 10 or 11 to Buffalo or New Orleans. So, yeah, I don't think they're going to trade up that far.
I have them going 16 to Baltimore. But it's because I think Baltimore's going to trade up for him. I think if anybody does, it's them. Because I look at their defense and I see Terrell Suggs, C.J. Mosley, Kamale Correa, Brent Urban, Brandon Williams, Bronson Kafusi. I see a giant piece in their front 7 missing on the strong side. And I think that's Hassan Reddick's best fit in the NFL as a strong side linebacker in the 3-4. And I can see the Ravens just being like, yeah, we're going to give our 1st and our 3rd. We'll move up to 11 with the Saints, or we'll move up to 12 with the Browns, and we're going to take that guy. And I think it's going to be Hassan Reddick. And I think you put Hassan Reddick on the other side of Terrell Suggs. You got C.J. Mosley in the middle. You got scary, scary, scary good front 7 again.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see whether the Falcons trade up. I think this rumor is plausible, but I would just be a little surprised if the Falcons were so in love. Or no, let me rephrase that. I know from my perspective, I think once you get past Myles Garrett and Solomon Thomas and maybe Derek Barnett, I don't think there's really that much difference between these edge rushers. I think they all have their sort of strengths and weaknesses, but I think overall they're all sort of lumped in the same group. So I don't necessarily see the value of trying to leapfrog some of those teams to get a pass rusher when even to get the guy that's number one left on your board after those big three that I just mentioned, as opposed to waiting and you might be stuck with the fourth guy on your list. But I think whoever that fourth guy is probably is going to be probably pretty close to as good as whoever is number one on that list. But maybe the Falcons have a different evaluation and they really maybe only like two or three of those guys, and they really are intent on moving up to get their guy. And if they give up a fourth round pick, as Tony Pauline suggests, what it would take to swap picks with the Seahawks, I wouldn't be mad at that. But it just, to me, if you're going to trade up in this draft, I don't think you necessarily need to do it for an edge rusher when this is a really deep group, and there's probably 10 or 12 edge rushers that could really help out this team in a lot of ways. And I'm sure at least one of those guys is going to be there at pick 63. So I think this rumor is certainly plausible, but from my perspective, I think the Falcons will probably stand pat at 31 and take an edge rusher if that's the choice there. I think if they're going to trade up, I think it makes more sense to trade up for a guard like Forrest Lamp, but you might have to jump higher than Seattle to get him. So we'll see what happens. We got a question about Charles Harris specifically from Evan Birchfield. If the Falcons are trying to move up for Harris, how would he fit in the defense? Is he good? Don't know much about him.
Harris is good, but I don't think he's the kind of athlete they would want as a trade up. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Aaron's right, and that three cone doesn't matter. But I don't see them trading up for a guy who's in a below average three cone at a spot that three cone is a very high indicator of success. And I know that sounds like I'm putting too much on one drill, but I mean, that's kind of what Thomas Dimitroff does. He's from that Patriots tree. Belichick, if you look at all of his picks, they have great three cones, except for like Dante Hightower. He's like the one guy that they took that doesn't have a great three cone. So, I mean, Harris would fit the defense. He'd be a good fit at Leo. He'd be a good fit at right end in the nickel package. He's a hell of a pass rusher. He fucking blows as a run defender. I don't trust him in base packages. I don't trust him if we need a run defender on the edge in nickel packages. I just don't like him against the run. So would I be okay with Charles Harris? Yeah. I think Charles Harris might be better off playing in a 3-4 where he can set the edge that way as opposed to a 4-3 where he's going to have his hand in the dirt going against the left tackle every down.
I like Charles Harris a lot. I think after Garrett, he's probably the best pure speed rusher in this draft. I think he has a lot of potential. I think he's the best pass rusher that Missouri has produced in recent years since Aldon Smith. And he reminds me a little bit of Aldon Smith, particularly in how they sort of used him in a variety of ways, lining him up inside and outside. I don't think he's as good as Aldon Smith, but I should, full disclosure, I wasn't that high on Aldon Smith. And when the 49ers took him in the top 10 that year, I was like, really? Okay. But it is one of those things where I do think he has a lot of potential. I think the thing about the three cone, at least the part that I find interesting, is he had a 7.35 three cone at his pro day after a really bad one at the combine, but that was so bad that it had to be an outlier, which it was. But the interesting thing about Charles Harris's three cone is, like, I saw reports that say he had a three cone under 7.1, and then I saw reports that say he had a three cone in the 7.3s. So I think that the interesting thing about him is it's going to depend a lot on individual team stopwatch. If you're a team that, clocked that 7.09 or 7.05 three cone for him, you're not going to be that concerned with his, his agility and whatnot. And it's plausible that the Falcons were one of those teams. So, like, I wouldn't necessarily look at that 7.3 three cone and be like, oh, he wouldn't be the Falcons guy, just because that's one report of what one team's stopwatch was. And it's one of the reasons why it's hard to put too much stock in some of the times from pro days as like the end all be all of sort of evaluating guys in terms of their athletic cutoffs, just because there's so much variability because it's all hand timed. Okay. Da, da, da. All right, we got a couple of other questions about trading up, more broad questions. Falcons Andy asks, do you think the Falcons will stay at 31 if the team wants to move up at any point? Do you think there are any players they might consider trying to package?
I can't really think of any players that would make sense for them to trade based on just a pure talent perspective. But based on a contract perspective, if they could get someone to take, I don't know, Rashid Hageman in a trade up, and they trade up Hageman, their fourth and their first round pick to move up to like 20, I wouldn't be that shocked at a move like that. But I don't know if that would actually happen. But I could, like, that would be the kind of trade up that I could see, like, okay, well, I get that.
Yeah, I mean, the Falcons don't really have those players that sort of fit your parameters as prime tradable assets now that I thought going this time last year, I thought you could have made a strong case for Robert Alford just because of his contract situation. And it's typically the types of players that teams want to trade are guys that are having a contract situation upcoming, usually the following year, and the team has already sort of internally made the decision that they're not going to pay that guy whatever his market is going to be. And there isn't really necessarily anybody like that. Like the two closest people to that, and I'm not saying that the Falcons would trade these guys, but I'm saying they sort of are the closest two players that sort of fit that description, would be Tevin Coleman and Justin Hardy. Coleman, particularly if the Falcons have already made the decision that they want to pay Devontae Freeman. Technically, I guess you could say Devontae Freeman if they haven't made that decision. Justin Hardy would be only in the sense of that the team has already internally decided, oh yeah, we're going to keep Mohamed Sanu for another 2-3 years. We're going to pay Taylor Gabriel a long-term contract. We're just biding our time. And then maybe we would trade Justin Hardy because we could get like a mid-round pick for that. Again, not suggesting that either one of those guys would be realistic options, but those would be probably your two best tradable assets, because generally speaking, teams want to trade for guys that have a little time left on their contract and are on rookie deals, and both Coleman and Hardy would qualify under that mark. So, all right. Okay. So many questions, guys. I appreciate everybody sending in those questions. I think, Evan, we already answered your question about trading up. Evan has another question. How many league trades will happen in the first round, if any?
I'm going to go with 8. I know it sounds like a lot, but I think there's going to be a lot of activity, especially in the teens.
I think the average number of first-round trades the last 3 years has been 4. I think there's probably going to be, I'll say it'll be like 6. So yeah. Hope that answers your question, Evan. All right, we got some more mailbag questions. ATL Sports 404 asks, after Julio, Sanu, Gabriel, and Hardy, who will be the wide receiver 5 and wide receiver 6 this season? And on a similar note, at Vin Cruz asks, do you think Andre Roberts sticks?
I think Andre Roberts sticks as the wide receiver 5 and punt returner. I think there may not be a wide receiver 6 this year, but if there is, it's probably going to be either an undrafted free agent they bring in or Devin Fuller, whoever can come in and be that kick returner. I think the kick returner is the wide receiver 6 or the third running back, either or, depending on who ends up winning the job.
Yeah. I think Roberts will stick as that 5th wide receiver. I think the 6th wide receiver is an open competition. I think the Falcons would love to see Devin Fuller win that kick return job and grab that spot. I don't think he's guaranteed. I think that's a toss-up at best. I think Nick Williams, I think guys like B.J. Daniels, Anthony Doble, some of those guys will all have opportunities to win a spot. I think there's a chance the Falcons might use a late-round pick on a wide receiver. So that'll be a guy that might be in the mix as well. And I think there'll be undrafted guys. So I don't think there's a guarantee, as Scott said, that they will keep 6 wide receivers on the roster this year. But I think if anybody, if you're gonna make a bet, I guess Fuller's probably your best bet. But I wouldn't put too much money on it at this point. Okay, Stephen Brooklyn asks, how many spots on the 53-man roster are open for a rookie to take? Whose roster spot becomes tenuous if the Falcons draft that position?
Oof. Using big words on us, man. Nah. I mean, I don't know. Let's just kind of go down the roster. So I think we got 2 quarterbacks that are pretty much set. Yep. Ryan and Schaub. So we'll do 2 there. I think you've got 2 running backs in Freeman and Coleman. I don't even know if you could argue that Derek Coleman and Soma Vainuku, I don't even think you can guarantee one of those is going to be the starting fullback. They may go out there and sign a guy and end up using him as the starting fullback. So I'm not even including them. You got Julio Jones, Mohamed Sanu, Justin Hardy, Taylor Gabriel. Those guys are set. So we'll have 4 wide receivers. And I think at tight end, you got Hooper and Toilolo. Those guys are set. On the offensive line, Matthews, Levitri, Mack, Schrader. I think those 4 guys are set. After that, I think it's an open competition. We all love Ben Garland, but I'm not going to guarantee him a roster spot. So that's 11 offensive positions that I think are up for grabs if we're looking at it this way. Wide receiver 5, wide receiver 6, all of your depth on the offensive line plus right guard, and then your 3rd running back and your fullback. So that's a lot of stuff. Oh, and your 3rd and 4th tight end.
Okay. So, well, I don't think that many spots are open. I think I would put Ben Garland on that list. I put Schweitzer on that list. I put Roberts on that list. I'd put Teron Ward on that list. I'm not going to put
Teron Ward on this list.
I would put I put whoever wins that fullback competition on that list as well. Each one, Derek Coleman and Soma Vainuku could count a half a roster spot because they're competing for 1 spot. So I think it's closer to maybe 4 or 5 spots that are really open. I think Josh Perkins and Tia Lavea, or Josh Perkins and the other tight ends, are competing for 1 spot. I think the Falcons will add a tight end in the draft. But if I'm looking at this offensive roster, I'm looking at swing tackle, right guard, tight end as the 3 prime spots to draft. I think there's a chance they could take another wide receiver. I think it's a very low chance. It's in the single digits. I think there's a chance that they'll take a running back, but I don't think that guy's going to leapfrog Teron Ward on the depth chart. I think he's going to be the 4th guy, and he's probably going to have a redshirt season unless he can carve out a significant role in special teams.
So we'll say Aaron says 18 on offense with like 7 guys that need to go. On defense, I think you could add, we'll say Reed, Claiborne, Poe, Jarrett, Hageman. Well, I wouldn't even say Hageman. Poe, Jarrett, Shelby. Like, that's your defensive lineman. Like, I think Crawford will add him too. So 5 guys on the line. Beasley's obviously going to be set. Jones, Campbell, and Reynolds, those 3 guys at linebacker are going to be set. Ishmael's set. Alford, Allen, Neal, Trufant, Collins, Poole. Those 6 guys are going to be set. I mean, I'm only at like 16 guys on defense. There's a lot of spots that they need on defense as far as depth, or that I don't think there's a set roster spot. Like, I think Goodwin or Wilson or Ray Wilson or Olatoye is going to win a spot. I think Niesman will probably have a spot. So, like, we'll add 2 spots there. But, like, I don't see a lot of backup linebackers. I don't see a lot of good backup edge guys. I mean, they might go out and get a guy to play strong side linebacker in the 5th or 7th round that's not even on the roster right now. And then, of course, you've got your 3 specialists. So, I mean, there's probably like 14 spots. We'll say 7 on offense, 7 on defense that need to be filled and that aren't set.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. I think Goodwin's pretty good to go. I think Olatoye is probably good to go. I'd put Hageman on that list. I don't remember if you mentioned Upshaw or Brooks Reed, but I'd put them on that list. They're good to go.
I mentioned Reed.
Okay.
He was the first one I mentioned on the line.
Okay. And yeah, like I think Neesman probably would make the team. I think the Falcons will probably draft a safety, whether that's probably will be a free safety. We'll see if that's more of a sort of interchangeable guy because Neesman right now would be the best candidate um, among the backups to play, that hybrid strong safety, free safety role that Thurisi kind of played in the past. And yeah, I think they'll get add some depth at linebacker. I think they'll add a pass rusher. They'll probably add another interior defensive lineman. But yeah, I think the positive thing is I think the Falcons have good enough depth, reliable enough depth, because I do think some of these young guys that people would normally overlook and say, oh, he's on the bubble, someone like Deji Olatoye. I think unless you take a cornerback in the first 3 rounds, I don't think a cornerback you're going to draft on day 3 is going to be a better player than Deji Olatoye day 1. So it's one of those things where, like, I think some of these guys can sort of be considered your day 3 picks. And I think one of the possible repercussions we may look at with this draft a few years down the road is a lot of these day 3 guys may not wind up sticking on the team for more than a couple of seasons. And I think that's a testament to sort of the depth that Dimitroff and Quinn have built over the last couple of years with some of these guys off the street, like the Deji Olatoyes, the Brian Pools, the CJ Goodwins, and whatnot. So, yeah, I don't think this roster is that wide open in terms of guys coming in. I honestly think you're probably going to have your 6 or 7 draft picks if the Falcons wind up trading back at some point to pick up some extra mid-round picks or late-round picks. And you might have 1 or 2 undrafted guys that have an outside shot at making a roster spot. But for the most part, I think this roster is pretty much set. You could go right now and have a competent 46-man roster with the team right now. That's one of the reasons why I don't think necessarily trading back and getting assets this year is that valuable for the team. I think if you're going to trade back, you want to get assets next year where you can actually use those picks to really sort of plug some potential holes. Okay. ATL Sports 404 asks if you had to guess how many draft picks will be used for offensive players and how many for defensive players.
Let's see. I think there's going to be an edge. I think there's going to be a defensive end / defensive tackle. I think there's going to be an offensive guard. I think there's going to be either a tight end, a running back, or wide receiver. So there's a 4th. I think there's going to be a swing tackle, and then probably like a linebacker or safety or something. So I'm going to go 50-50, 3-3.
Yeah, I think that, I think with the 6 picks they have right now, I'm thinking tight end, swing tackle, guard on the offense, safety, linebacker, and one defensive lineman right now. I think they'll probably move back and might pick up a mid or late round pick in a trade or something that will wind up getting them another D tackle or whatnot. But yeah, I think if we'll probably see if they wind up getting more picks. We'll see maybe 1 or 2 more on defense to shore up some depth there. But yeah, I think it will probably be about a 50-50 split. All right. Okay, next question. Charlie Rogers at Charlie Rogers 68 asks, if Evan Ingram is there at 31, would you be surprised or upset if the Falcons picked him?
I'd be shocked if they took him. I actually have him there at 31 and then passing on him. So I would be very shocked if they took him. That's not to say it'd be a bad pick. I just would be very shocked. I think they're focusing in hard right now on offensive and defensive linemen, and that's basically it.
Yeah, Ingram's an interesting player because I feel like Ingram is purely a best player available pick, because I can certainly envision a future where Evan Ingram is considered probably like the 2nd or 3rd best asset on our offense, playing sort of a Delaney Walker-like role. If you guys remember back to how Delaney Walker was used in San Francisco, when they had Vernon Davis and they were playing under Jim Harbaugh, and Walker was sort of this joker in their offense, and as opposed to a traditional tight end. I think I can envision a role for Evan Ingram as that sort of joker. He plays H-back. He'll play some flex tight end. He'll play some slot receiver. They might put him in the backfield and whatnot, and sort of use him in a variety of ways. And I think that would be a great pick because it would certainly show that the team is thinking long term in terms of their development as opposed to the short term. Like Scott said, though, I would be very surprised if they made that move. But I do imagine a scenario where 2 or 3 years down the road, people are like looking at it with the Falcons offense and like, yeah, Julio Jones is obviously Julio Jones, and you got to stop the running game. But that Evan Ingram, man, he's killing us. Like we don't have an answer for him. I feel like, I would use this comp, but obviously his name has some other issues. But I think Aaron Hernandez is a good comp to what you could potentially use Evan Ingram as. So, yeah, I would definitely be for it because I think it would be a brilliant move. But I don't think it would be sort of designed to get the most in 2017. I think that's more of a 2018, 2019 move that pays off down the road. Okay. Tyrell Powell at Struggle Proof. If you had to pick one player that you believe will be at 31 and will make this D noticeably better, who would it be?
Derek Rivers. I know he'll be there, and I think he would make the defense noticeably better. I mean, he'd give you that weak side pass rusher that you need, that Atlanta doesn't really have right now.
Yeah, I mean, Rivers would probably be my pick. I think both him and Jordan Willis will be there at 31. So I like Rivers a little bit more than I like Jordan Willis. So I would pick Rivers right now.
Of course you do.
Yeah, because it's the opposite of your opinion, Scott. So that's how I roll.
That's how you've always rolled.
Yeah. I only joined this podcast so I could disagree with you on a weekly basis. Evan Birchfield asks, NFL Network has...
truth to that than you really want to admit.
I never tell a lie, Scott. Evan Birchfield asks, NFL Network had us drafting Kevin King, the cornerback, Mel Kiper and Todd McShay had us drafting DeMarcus Ware, the defensive lineman from Florida State. What are your thoughts?
Oh, man. Just both of those would be fucking stupid. I mean, Kevin King, he's a fucking badass at corner. But Atlanta's pretty stacked at cornerback right now. They really don't need anything there. Kevin King's awesome, but taking a cornerback's just fucking stupid. It's stupid. And then DeMarcus Walker, no. They have a shittier, a shittier version of DeMarcus Walker on the roster right now. And not shittier. DeMarcus Walker is a shittier version of what they've got in the roster right now, and Courtney Upshaw.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't see either of those.
I don't see either of these picks either. First of all, I think Kevin King is not going to be available when the Falcons are on the board. I think he's going to go much higher than people think. And I get why people keep mocking, cornerbacks like him to the Falcons because they watch the Super Bowl.
They've only seen one game.
Yeah, and he does fit what the Falcons are looking for at that position. And again, people I think sort of absentmindedly forget that Desmond Trufant is on the team. But DeMarcus Walker in the first round, that's a little bit of a reach for me because I don't think he's going to get drafted in the first 2 rounds. I think he's going to
get drafted in the first 4 rounds. If we're being honest,
I think he'll go some point in the 3rd round. But yeah, I would be very shocked. To me, I think the Falcons would only take DeMarcus Walker at the end of the 3rd round if they completely missed the boat on all the other pass rushers, and they're like, hey, we need a guy that can sort of be the long-term version of what we wanted Derek Shelby to be, or what we hope Jack Crawford is going to be if those guys are maybe only going to be around for another year or two. Walker potentially could be around for another 4+ years. So that's the only way that move sort of makes sense. I think Walker is a solid player, but yeah, taking him before pick 95, I think would be, at least for the Falcons, would be a bit of a reach. Noah Taylor asks, what's your take on Josh Jones from NC State and how might he fit with the Falcons?
I like him. I think he's probably more of a strong safety than a free safety in Atlanta's scheme. So if you're viewing Sherrod Niesman as that long-term option at, free safety, at least free safety depth, then you take Josh Jones. Do I think Josh Jones could play the single high? Probably, but I think it'd be pretty bad. I think it'd be pretty bad. I don't think it'd be a really good fit for him at all.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with Scott on this. I think Jones's best position in Atlanta is that sort of strong safety Keanu Neal role. I think he has a similar, or from what I've seen, I haven't watched a ton of him. I've seen about maybe a game's worth of his tape. So, but based off of that, I think his skill set is similar to Keanu Neal. I don't think he's quite to the level of Keanu Neal, but I think it's similar. And I think you would sort of be miscasting him as a free safety. He has experience playing single high, so it's not like he can't do it. But in terms of doing it every down, or at least 95% of the downs, which is what the Falcons have asked Ricardo Allen to do over the last 2 years, is really sort of playing to his biggest weaknesses. I think Jones will probably wind up going somewhere in the early to mid portion of the third round. So I think that's probably a little too high to take what is essentially a high-level backup for Keanu Neal. Now, if he fell maybe to the 5th round or something like that, then I think you might start sniffing around him. But I think some other team will wind up drafting Josh Jones, and I think they'll get a good player out of him, particularly if they have a scheme that will ask him to come and play in the box quite a bit, because I think that's really where he's best at. Okay. Evan Birchfield asks, if you had to guess right now, how many quarterbacks go in round 1?
4.
I got 3. I think Trubisky will go first. I think Mahomes will come off the board not far after him. I think both of those guys will come off in the top 15. I do think Deshaun Watson is going to have the sort of classic green room waiting period that we've seen in recent years with a lot of guys. I think that, someone will try to get him somewhere in the 20s, maybe even the 30s. If someone doesn't come up into the 20s and get him, I don't think Houston is going to take him. I don't think Kansas City is going to take him. So I think he could wind up falling all the way to Saints at 32 if someone doesn't come up and get him from round 2. I don't think Kaiser's going to go in the first round. I think there's a decent chance that Kaiser is the 5th cornerback taken in this draft after Davis Webb or Nate Peterman. So I think Kaiser will probably go somewhere in the middle or the later portion of round 2. So I think it's going to be 3.
Which is completely opposite from what I'm believing. I'm believing they all go top 12. And I think you've got I think you get a guy like Trubisky going number 6 overall to the Jets because they're stupid and they're going to take a bad quarterback like they always do. I think you get Watson going number 3 to the Bears because I don't think the Bears truly believe in old Mike Glennon. I think you get number 2 overall is going to be Kaiser because I think he's the best fit for Shanahan's system. And I think you're going to get number 12 overall as Pat Mahomes because the Browns are going to panic and be like, well, we really like this quarterback anyway. So.
Okay, interesting. I don't think you're crazy. I think this is one of the interesting thing about this draft is no one really knows what's going to happen. So like if that did go down like that, I wouldn't be told. It wouldn't come out of left field. It would just not be what I expect to see. I think Trubisky will go somewhere between picks 3 and 6 because I think someone's going to try to jump up and take him. If the Bears don't take him at 3, I think we'll probably see Cleveland jump up and take him somewhere between the 4 and 5 range. I'm looking at you, Jacksonville, as the team that wants to trade back. So we'll see. Right now, I have Mahomes going to Arizona at 13. Okay. All right. Evan Birchfield, again, asks, probably safe to say the Falcons' big board has Lamp at the top. What's the perfect chain of events needing to happen for us to get him?
I mean, basically, he's got to fall to. I'm not going to sit here and do a full mock draft trying to predict this, but basically, you got to have the guy fall to 26, and then Atlanta trades up with Seattle. If Seattle's like, yeah, we'll trade with you, and we're like, yeah, we're gonna take Jordan Willis, and then they go, all right, and then we trade up, and then we're like, all right, cool, thanks, we're taking Forrest Lamp. I think that'd be the only way it would really work.
Yeah, I don't think Seattle's going to take Forrest Lamp if he's on the board. I don't think Seattle's going to take an offensive lineman that early in the draft, really? Especially a guard. I think they like taking those guys sort of more in the middle round. So I could see them going with a third round guard. But I think the scenario is you gotta keep an eye on, I think, Miami and the Giants at 22 and 23. Because I think if Lamp sort of falls into the 20s range, those are the two teams that are most likely to take him. After that, I think he's going to slide all the way down. I don't see Green Bay taking a guard that high, even though they could use a guy like Lamp. And I think that's the scenario right now, just because there's not that many teams after a certain point in the draft. Like, there's a couple of teams at the top that could really use a guard, but I don't think those teams are really in the market to use a top 15 pick on a guard like Arizona or Indianapolis or teams like that. So I think if Miami is the team you got to really keep your eye on. I think they're the prime candidates to take him at this point. I don't think the Giants really want to take an offensive lineman at that spot because they're stupid. But I think, if he gets past Miami, I think there's a very good chance he's going to slide all the way to Atlanta. Okay. ATL Sports 404 asks, I really want Forrest Lamp. If he's still on the board at 31, do you see Atlanta passing on him?
At 31? Hell no. If he falls right into their lap at 31, they're just going to run up and take him, which they should.
Okay. Yeah, same way. I think he's number one on their draft board at this point. Now, I did think Miles Jack was number one on their draft board last year, and I was very wrong about that. So, what do I know? But, yeah, I would be surprised if Lamp is on the board and the Falcons don't pull the trigger on him. Jason at your boy J94 asks, what is your guys' perfect mock draft rounds 1 through 7 for the Falcons?
1 through what? Round 1 through 7?
Yeah.
Okay, I was like, rounds 1 through 37. I'm not here for that. All right, so if I had to go 1 through 7, I'm a huge Jordan Willis fan. I think Jordan Willis in round 1. I think taking a guy like Taylor Moton or Ethan Posich, round 2. I think round 3, there's a guy from Villanova named Tano Passanel, using him as that like Michael Bennett type role. I think him in the 3rd. In the 4th, taking a safety like a Eddie Jackson or Marcus Mage, someone along those lines who can play that deep 3rd. I think round 5, go with a swing tackle like a Storm Norton. And then round 7, take a linebacker like a Blair Brown.
Okay. This is tough because, if I was actually picking my perfect mock, it would probably not address any of the Falcons' needs just because I would just pick the guys I like. So I will try to hit their needs in terms of this. I'll say round 1, I think Forrest Lamp. I'll say round 2, somehow Derek Rivers falls all the way there because people hate Youngstown State. They hate Penguins, I guess. Round 3, let's go Jaleel Johnson. Round 4, we'll go Tedrick Thompson. Round 5, we'll go George Kittle. Round 6, I don't really care at that point. So, pick a guy. That's fine. Yeah. So sorry, I haven't thought about who's, maybe Samson Eggbekon if he's still there in round 6, and round 7. I don't know. Okay, yeah, some tackle that I haven't watched yet. Okay. Evan Birchfield asks, considering we don't have many holes going into the draft, would you rather see us reach for a need or take the best players available?
I would rather them take the guy that fits their needs. I would rather see them take the guy that fits who they want and who's going to actually make sense for them. So I guess if it was up to me, take the guy who fits the needs.
Contrary to my last answer, I'm a BPA guy all the way. I would love to see the team just sort of draft players that they sort of see as, like guys like Buda Baker, guys like Malcolm McDowell. I keep calling Malcolm McDowell, Malik McDowell. Someone like David Njoku or something like that. Like, just take good players, similar to Evan Ingram, as opposed to filling needs. I don't feel like any of the Falcons' needs are so dire that if they don't draft that guy this year, then it's going to break their offense or their defense or whatnot, or there won't be similar players available potentially next year. But I don't have that. I'm not so inclined in that opinion to be like, oh no, if you draft for need, that's a bad decision or anything like that. I just tend to like the long-term view. I think the Falcons are in a good enough position right now for the first time in a long time that they can sort of take more of a long-term view of what type of offense, what type of defense do we want to run 2-3 years from now, as opposed to let's plug in some of these holes for the immediate future that, long-term may not have as much upside as some of these other picks. But again, that's just me. So, yeah. We got 2 quarterback questions. Falcons Andy asks, do you think the Falcons will take a backup quarterback at any point? And Matty Shack 11 asks, any late quarterback projects worthwhile? Brady Gustafson, Alex Torgensen types?
Just stop with the weird names that suck. Like, I don't want any of those weird Swiss, Swedish, whatever the hell they are. If you're going to take a quarterback prospect that's like somewhat of a project, take Josh Dobbs in like the 3rd round or the 4th round.
Okay. I haven't really watched any of the quarterbacks outside the main guys. I've seen Dobbs over the last couple of years. I've seen Chad Kelly over the last couple of years. I've seen a little bit of Gerard Evans. I've watched C.J. Beathard in passing. I don't really have a good evaluation of how he projects to the NFL, but for the most part, most of those guys I haven't seen enough of them outside the top 6 or 7 guys to really give an opinion on what wanting the Falcons to draft them. Dobbs would be an interesting project to develop, but I think contrary to what I just said, I don't really think there's a lot of upside there in terms of taking a flyer on one of these guys. I did like Dak Prescott a lot. I did see some of the flaws in his game, but he was one of those guys that I remember talking on this show last year that it was like, yeah, if he's there at a certain point in the draft, I would be all over him because I do think he has a skill set that is worthwhile to the Falcons. I don't necessarily, or based off of what I've seen this year, I haven't really seen that guy that sort of catches my eye as like, oh, this guy could be something in the future. Maybe Dobbs. But like other than that, it's one of those things where like I don't really care if the Falcons draft a quarterback. I think it would be not a waste of a pick, but it just kind of would be not the ideal value at that point. Okay, we got 2 questions, similar questions. Corey Woodruff and Falcons Andy asked similar questions. Corey says, what player are we not paying enough attention to as an option for the Falcons in the first 3 rounds? And Andy says, who who is the player that hasn't been talked about but could be a surprise pick? Follow-up is any chance of Reuben Foster.
So Reuben Foster would be an interesting selection, and I could see that being like a surprise pick of, oh, hey, holy shit, this dude's still on the board. Let's take him. Like, let's see what would happen if we took him. Because he's just a badass football player. But if I had to pick like a surprise, like, oh, we're not seeing it the way we had Keanu Neal this past year, I think it'd be Malik McDowell. I think if he's there, like, I know it's the pick, but it just I don't see it as I don't see that as the pick that they'd make if he's there. Like, if Malik McDowell's there, I could see them letting him fall and being like, hey, we'll see if he's there at 63. So if they took him at 31, that'd be a surprise to me, just because of his off-field coachability questions.
Yeah. I'm trying to think, like a specific guy. I don't know. I feel like everybody's been sort of talked about enough to the point where it wouldn't be too much of a surprise. I know we've talked about a handful of guys way more than other people. So, like, I don't feel like saying, Bucky Hodges is a surprise or anything like that in the first 3 rounds. So, like, someone like that. But I think maybe...
Like, if they took Cam Robinson in the first round, it'd be a surprise.
Yeah, I mean, it would be a surprise to me, but, people have talked about it, so...
Or like Garrett Bowles in the first round would be a surprise.
I think that would only be a surprise because I don't think Garrett Bowles is coming anywhere close to pick 31, but if he's there, I think they would definitely take him. So, yeah, I don't really have an answer for you, Corey. I am open for all surprises. So, I'm sure the Falcons will throw us a curveball at some point because they always do. But in terms of being able to anticipate it, that's part of the reason why it's a curveball. It's hard to anticipate. So I can't really think of anything. And as for Reuben Foster, I would be surprised at that. I don't think the Falcons are really interested in inside linebackers at this point. Foster certainly would be a upgrade at that weak side spot. Or maybe you could plug him at middle linebacker and move Deion Jones to the weak side. So it makes sense, but I just think given all the stuff surrounding him, and also the fact is, I think Foster's a good player, don't get me wrong, but I don't think he's sort of that, like, talent level to the point like, oh, man, if you don't get Reuben Foster, you're going to regret that 3 years from now. At this point, I think the Falcons are in a good enough position right now with their inside linebacker core that I don't think we're going to be kicking ourselves for not drafting Reuben Foster. He might wind up being better than either one of our guys, but I don't feel like it's going to be to the degree where we're going to be like, man, we should have really drafted Reuben Foster because he fell all the way to us and we screwed up by not picking him. Okay. Evan Birchfield asks, if we miss out on getting Lamp or Feeney, what's the next guard you want?
I'm a big fan of Ethan Posick. I think him as a guard would be amazing to see.
Well, I'm going to pick, surprise, I'm going to pick the pick guy. I'm going to go Dorian Johnson. Now, he bombed his 3-cone because of a hamstring injury. So I don't know if that's going to scratch him off Sir Thomas Dimitrov's
the hamstring injury actually makes sense because his combine numbers didn't fit with what his film showed. His film showed a guy that was way faster than that. Yeah. So, I know Dimitrov needs to have that high 3-cone to justify any pick, but he would be the guy. I think he's probably the next best guard in this draft class. I think he's actually better than Feeney, but I wouldn't expect the Falcons to prioritize him over Feeney. Okay. Evan Birchfield asks, we've apparently met/visited with few running backs. Is it safe to say we'll likely draft one? I wouldn't be shocked to see the Falcons draft one. I know Aaron's probably not for it, but it would not be anything out of the ordinary to be like, oh, hey, they took, I don't know, TJ Logan in the 4th or 5th round to be a kick return, third running back. And because they feel like he's the guy that could potentially take over for Tevin Coleman.
I don't think it's likely that we'll draft one. I think it's unlikely that we'll draft one. I won't say it's impossible. I would say it's probably like a 25% chance they might pull the trigger on a guy in round 6 or 7, just because you can get some decent value there in most drafts. And I think this draft won't be any different. But I think many of the guys that they've looked at, that they've shown, that they've reported interest in, like Kareem Hunt and Marlon Mack, are going to be 3rd or 4th round picks. I don't think those guys are going to be, real targets for the Falcons unless they really slide in draft, which I doubt they will. And I think the other guys they've primarily looked at are more sort of undrafted targets as opposed to draftable targets. There's a lot of guys that the Falcons have worked out this year that I think they're sort of prioritizing so that they can woo those guys in the undrafted free agency market. You see teams like Green Bay do that. Like all of Green Bay's visits are basically guys that they plan on signing as undrafted free agents, and they sort of keep their guys that they're going to target in the draft close to the best. So I think we've seen a steady mix of that for the Falcons. So I don't think just because they've shown prominent interest in a couple of guys means that they're planning on drafting a guy. But it's possible, but I don't think it's likely. Okay, Matty Shack 11 asks, Falcons like to stockpile slot receivers. Should they draft an outside possession receiver in the middle rounds for depth? If so, who?
If they were going to draft any receiver that's like an outside possession receiver for depth in, we'll say, the 5th round, they should look at Robert Davis out of Georgia State. One of my favorite players in this draft. He's very fast. He's very strong. He goes up. He fights for the ball, the connection at the catch point. I think the only real thing that we've got against him is that he played at Georgia State. He didn't really play against great teams, and when he did, he kind of got shut down. But I think that's also because his quarterback fucking blew. So there's that. Outside of that, I mean, I think that's the guy, if there is one.
Yeah, I have not really watched any of these receivers this year. I probably watched like 3 guys. Like I just watched Corey Davis like 2 weeks ago, just because I don't think the Falcons are going to draft a wide receiver.
Corey Davis is good though, isn't he?
Yes, he is very good. Yes, a middle-class man's AJ Green. He would be a guy, he's one of those guys that if he falls to the Falcons pick, they better take his butt cheeks, just because he's really good. There's no reason for him to be picked that late. He's going to be a steal in a couple of years. What was I saying? Oh yeah, outside possession receiver. I don't think the Falcons need possession receivers. If they're going to draft a wide receiver, they need to get a guy who can line up outside and stretch the field. They don't really have that outside of Julio Jones. Andre Roberts, that's not really his game. He's more of a slot receiver. He does have speed, but he's not really a guy that when he lines up outside, most starting outside corners are not going to be like, oh no, I got to cover Andre Roberts. He's going to burn me.
You'd like Robert Davis. He runs a 4.44. He shows it on the field, and he's 6'3".
Sounds like a plan. So, if the Falcons are going to draft a wide receiver, I want someone, who can take the top off a defense. I need only 4.3 guys. So if you don't run a 4.3, then you ain't for me. That's what I believe in, because that's what Aldridge Robinson was.
I'll take a 4.4 guy, because I think a 4.4 guy with good route running can do the same thing that a 4.3 guy can do.
Okay, go ahead and settle for less, Scott, with your 4.4s. No 4.4 receiver has ever amounted to anything in the NFL, in my opinion.
Yeah, only like I don't know.
Everybody.
All of them. Maybe not all of them, because obviously you've got Ted Ginn who ran a 4.4, but yeah, I mean I can go down the list of guys who are 4.4, even 4.5 guys. AJ Green runs a 4.5 flat, and he burns defenses.
I know. I'm kidding. I know.
Oh, come on.
ATL Sports 44 asks, is tight end still a need for the Falcons going into the draft?
There's a fucking bear shit in the woods. Yes. When the biggest tight end signing they had this offseason was Levine Toilolo, that should have told you everything you needed to know. I mean, I'd be open for him to bring back Jacob Tamme because I don't see what's going on with Jacob Tamme, but yeah.
Yeah, I think tight end is definitely still a need. I think the Falcons will look to draft somebody that can sort of slide into that third tight end spot and be a developmental option. I think they have multiple options. I think we're going to be able to tell quite a bit about what type of offense Sarkisian wants to run by whoever they take at tight end. Do they take a guy that's more of a flex tight end that they can sort of be more of a slot receiver? Do they take a tight end that's more of an H-back that can be a little bit of a hybrid fullback type of guy to sort of offset the loss of DeMarco? Do they take a straight-up Y tight end that is going to put his hand in the dirt and block like a Levine Toilolo does? That'll be an interesting pick for the Falcons. And sort of, I think, right now you sort of have a flex guy in Josh Perkins. I think you have that Y guy a little bit in DJT Lavea. I think ideally the Falcons can find somebody that sort of combines their two skill sets, or they can add a guy that's a little bit more of an H to sort of offset those guys, and sort of they can plug and play depending on the matchup and how they want to use those guys. So, yeah, we'll see what happens, but I definitely think the Falcons will come away with a tight end at some point in this draft. Falcons Andy asks, after bringing in hard-hitting strong safety and athletic linebackers last year, which players do you think are the best fits for Dan Quinn's ideal scheme this year?
Oof, that's kind of a tough one. I'm gonna go back to Jordan Willis, but guys like Jordan Willis, Derek Rivers, I really like Budda Baker as a safety. I mean, there's a whole plethora of dudes that would do really well in this defense, that would really fit what they're looking for, and that would not be ridiculously expensive in terms of draft capital. Like, there's just all sorts of dudes. Like, if they can get Chris Wormley, I think Wormley would be a great fit. And he's not exactly going to cost them anything more than like a first-round pick, which I know that might sound like a lot, but a first-round pick for a guy like that's worth it.
Yeah, I think Malik McDowell would be a perfect fit in terms of the sort of ideal 5 technique strong side defensive end that can kick inside and nickel downs. I think he's a real perfect fit for that. I think Wormley is another good fit because he can play multiple techniques across the line of scrimmage. I think if you're looking for a center fielder that's the ideal fit in this scheme, I think Budda Baker or Marcus Williams would be that.
I think Hooker would be great in this scheme, that role too, though.
Yeah, Hooker would be, yeah. I don't even, some of these guys are going to be picked high. I don't even think about them anymore just because they've been, that's a foreign concept to me talking about some of these guys. But trying to think.
It's not like I think the Falcons picked 8 and we were talking about Vic Beasley.
I think Josh Jones, as I said earlier, I think he would be a sort of close to an ideal fit as a strong safety in this scheme. I think Obi would be a pretty good fit as a strong safety in Dan Quinn's scheme.
I think Obi could play free.
I think he could play free in a lot of other schemes, but I think playing him, similar to Josh Jones, I think playing him at a free safety in this scheme is sort of wasting his talent. I think he'd be better fit at strong safety because he can do more things. I'm trying to think. Linebackers, I haven't really evaluated that many linebackers. I think Hassan Riddick would be a perfect fit at weak side linebacker in this scheme. I think he can also be a really good fit at Sam linebacker as well, but he doesn't have quite the length that I think is ideal for that spot, so I think he's a better fit at weak side. TJ Watt would be
I was going to say, there's a guy named Grover Stewart who'd make a great nose tackle in this scheme. because he's basically the same dude he's like a very, very poor man's Tarek Bell.
Yeah, I think Tyus Bowser and TJ Watt would also be great Sam linebackers in this scheme. Reuben Foster would be a really good Mike in this scheme as well. Yeah.
Taco Charlton would be a fun Leo in this scheme. Like, there's a lot of really good football players in this year's draft.
Yeah, there's a bunch of edge rushers that I think would fit as Leos. I think probably among them, obviously, Myles Garrett would be the perfect fit. I think Barnett would probably be the second best fit there. I think Jonathan Allen would be a great fit in this scheme just because he can play that inside-outside role similar to Adrian Claiborne. Yeah, so I think there's a lot of guys that certainly could fit this Falcons scheme pretty well and sort of be close to the prototypes that you would look for at that spots. Okay. All right. ATL Sports 404 asks, are there any DBs that stand out to you as day 2 targets for the Falcons?
Ooh, that's a fun one. Buda Baker for sure. Desmond King would be an interesting fit. Just those are the two off the top of my head. If you're looking at DBs, maybe at Dorie Jackson, if they think that he's like the legit free safety that they want. I just don't think they see him as a corner.
Yeah, I think Buddha is going to go in round 1. I think Marcus Williams is a little bit more up their alley in day 2. Maybe Desmond King in round 3. There's been a lot of Tedrick Thompson hype as of late. I've sort of seen him more as a 4th round guy, but maybe that pushes him up into round 3. I haven't really watched that many cornerbacks to have an opinion on those guys. So I like Cameron Sutton as a possible free safety convert. Corn Elder would be a decent developmental free safety, I think, that could also play some slot corner for you. Yeah, those are really the guys that I really watched at this point. So, all right. Same guy, ATL Sports 404. Not specifically a Falcon question, but do you see TJ Watt as a 1st or 2nd round pick?
I have him going to Pittsburgh in the 1st round.
For most of this offseason, I've had him being the Packers pick at 29, but I think probably in what my final mock will be, I think I'll have him go somewhere in the top of the 2nd round. So I think he'll be a 2nd round pick when all is said and done.
I don't do more than just 1 round.
Yeah. Well, I'm basically saying he's not going to be my 1st round. So I think he'll be a 2nd round pick. That's what I'm saying. Same guy asked, would you be unhappy if the Falcons drafted Carl Lawson?
In the 2nd round? No. In the 1st round, I'd be livid.
I like Carl Lawson a lot. I like him more than some of these other guys that are talked about as 1st round picks. I think the only knock on Carl Lawson is the durability concerns. Just because most of his college career he's been, in and out of the trainer's room. But I think other than that, I think you can make an argument that he's better than some of these other guys that are a little bit more athletic than him. He's much more of a polished product. So if the Falcons took him at 31, I wouldn't be upset at all. I'd be surprised, but I wouldn't be upset at all.
You just get tired of the injury projects, man.
Fair enough. Okay. If Caleb Brantley ends up falling to day 3, do you think the Falcons would take a chance on him?
Yeah, of course. He's a 1st round caliber talent.
I don't know. I think the positive thing that Caleb Brantley has going for him is I think he has a little bit of a relationship with Dan Quinn because of their Florida connection. But I don't know if Dan Quinn would vouch for him given the light of the recent events. For those of you that don't know, he was charged with assault for.
He wasn't actually charged.
No, he was charged. Misdemeanor charges. Yeah.
But he pushed someone away from him. He didn't actually punch her the way that the thing said. So he might have been charged, but like when you look into it, it seems kind of bullshit.
Yeah, it sounds like he'll get exonerated or the charges will be dropped. But I think because of the optics of drafting somebody in the amount of time from when the charges came out this weekend and when you have to draft a guy, I don't think that's enough time for the team to do their sort of background scrambles to basically be able to come in front of a press conference to the media and say, oh yeah, we know that's going to get cleared up. It's just not enough time. If he had been charged like a month ago, I think there would be a much higher probability. But this close to the draft, the optics really hurt you in terms of that. And no team wants to get in front of the media without having done a lot of homework on a guy to be able to sit there and say, yeah, we're comfortable with him. So I would be surprised if the Falcons took him. I don't think it's impossible. I think probably the Falcons have a better chance of taking him than a lot of other teams just because of the connection that Quinn has to that program at Florida. But I wouldn't bet on it. Okay, I think this is our last question from the mailbag from Low Key Confucius at Jalen Mohammed. He asks, why the switch to Facebook Live?
Because our producer likes it, and because I got tired of producing the show.
Oh, I just love the way you answer that, Scott. I mean, yeah, that's the simplest answer for it. But we will.
I mean, is there any other way to put that? Like, our producer likes it, and if he wanted to do Google Hangouts, we would do Google Hangouts. He wants to do Skype and Facebook Live, so we do Skype and Facebook Live, and he's got it worked to where we go back on YouTube now. So we're on.
We're live on YouTube right now. We're live on Facebook, live on YouTube, and we're gonna be live on Periscope. And I think this, according to the people, including Evan, who's on our live chat, hello Evan, he loves Facebook Live. So if our best fan loves it, everyone loves it. Facebook Live is the future. Multimedia platforms. Aaron and Scott are going on a billboard soon. Get used to it, people. They're going to be everywhere.
Oh, man. That was our producer, Brian, ladies and gentlemen. So I knew when Scott answered that question that way, we were going to hear from Brian because just the way you answered it, it was going to be great. So, yeah, it's a great platform. I think it gets us a little bit more eyeballs than maybe YouTube does, or at least than what YouTube was doing. So that's the way I would probably say it, Scott. But, yeah, I guess it's because Brian wanted us to do it. Okay.
I did just want to answer one. There was one question I didn't think that we hit in our chat. It was from Shane Gray asking about Adrian Peterson.
Oh.
So let's kind of just run down why I think it was like 92.9's been talking about it all day. Like it's some great signing. I mean, the dude's done. Like, I love Adrian Peterson, probably one of my favorite football players of all time, definite Hall of Famer. But when you look at a true film study of what he was in the second half of 2015 and the better part of and every snap he played in 2016, he's done. Like, they're going to take him and he'll get maybe 2.5, 3 yards a carry, but he's just a guy now. He's just a guy who had a great career before, but he's just a guy. I think the best case scenario for them is Michael Turner circa 2012.
Okay. I don't think, I have two stances on this move. I think it's a solid move, contrary to what a lot of people say. I think he'll be productive there. I think he'll be more productive there than people think he will be. I think the problem I have with this move is not because I think Adrian Peterson is done. I don't think his signing moves the needle. The Saints' problem isn't their offense. Their problem is their defense. And so adding another solid backup running back that can sort of split reps with Mark Ingram and I think can sort of put up similar production, if not slightly lower production than what Mark Ingram has done in that offense. I think the value of that offense is they can spread the field and you can run. Adrian Peterson can run against six-man boxes, and I think he'll be effective doing that. I don't think he'll be, the Adrian Peterson of old, but I think he'll probably get to 4 yards a carry or something like that and look halfway decent. What does that do for the Saints team? Nothing, because their offense was already good. They already have a top 5 offense. Their problem is they can't stop anybody. That's been their problem for most of the last decade, outside of 1 year that they won the Super Bowl. So, it's a solid move. It's nice for Adrian Peterson to get another shot in the league. I'm happy for him. As Scott said, he'll be a future Hall of Fame, first ballot Hall of Famer, one of the great running backs of all time. But it doesn't do anything as a Saints move. It's a nice move for him, but doesn't do anything for that team just because their biggest weaknesses are all on the defensive side of the ball. If they may have signed an offensive lineman, I think that would be a little bit more critical of a move or a more bigger move for them. But I don't think it does much for the team, but it certainly helps him. Okay. I'm just scouring over the Facebook chat to see if there's anything that I missed. Now I'm bored. Okay, so that's it, guys. And we will be back next week to review what the Falcons did in the draft. We appreciate everybody tuning in on YouTube and Facebook Live now. Maybe this will go up on Periscope after. I don't know if it needs to, if you can find it on Facebook or YouTube, but we'll talk about that later off air. And you guys can submit your questions for what you want to ask us about the draft picks using the hashtag Falcons Mailbag. You can tweet the show's Twitter handle at FalconsPFC. I am at FalcFan. Scott is at Karasik S. Be sure to follow PF Central, where you can get all the links to all the videos and whatnot in the streams and all those sorts of things as well. Head on over to Pro Football Central. Give us a rating on iTunes, a like on YouTube and Facebook and all that stuff. You know what to do. So we'll be back next week to talk more Falcons football.